There are a lot of chords to learn on piano, lots of types of chords and of course 12 different notes to start them from, so it can be tough to know what to focus on. I've put together a bit of an overview to help give you some direction in your practice, to help organise it a bit in terms of your progression, your understanding of chords, being able to find them on the piano easily, and just simply what you're going to find most useful, what you're going to end up using more often earlier on playing piano. That overview to give you kind of a list of what you need to do is really the point of this video, and along the way I'm going to point you in the direction of videos and resources I have to do with everything that I mentioned, so you know where you can go and look to learn that stuff properly. There's links for all that below. You can save and watch after this one. So the main thing to focus on as a beginner is major chords and minor chords. Basically, they're the most common chords that you're going to come across. You're going to use them the most. They're the most useful. They're the most foundational chords to learn first before other types of chord. To help people memorize these and make it more manageable to learn, I start with the majors first and then break them up into 4 groups of 3, grouped by how the shapes look on the piano. So for example, the first group, C, F and G, they have all white notes in them. And then I move on to the next group, D, E and A, which go white, black, white. At this point, before finishing off the major groups, it's best to learn the minor chords beginning from those same notes, which is essentially all the white keys apart from B. These chords you'll likely end up using more when you're first learning and should be the focus to get nailed before moving on to the rest. You'll still come across the other chords in music sometimes when you're first learning, but when you're specifically practicing exercises to memorize chords, this is really clear in terms of learning to recognize the shapes on the piano to do it in this order. Here I want to point you in the direction of this video on how to memorize and practice all your major and minor chords, which breaks down these groupings and the whole process of learning them more thoroughly and gives you lots of other important tips to get these chords down and memorized really well, which is a must when you're learning piano. And I also have a free PDF on my website which has graphics and spellings for all the major and minor chords. When we first learn chords, we just learn them in root position, which is like the original form of the chord, one of each note in order. The name of the chord, the root, is the first one. But in reality, when we actually play music, we take the notes in the chord and we spread them out in all different kinds of ways. So the next thing to learn then, focusing on major and minor chords first, other chords too in the future, is to get familiar with a couple of other common positions we use to play them, and these are called inversions. The quick version of that is that we rearrange the order of the notes into a couple of other positions, the same notes in a different order. I can't emphasize enough how important that is to get really comfortable and practice finding these shapes on the piano, because we just use them all the time to play music. They're really going to help you navigate the keyboard. So I do have a specific playlist on inversions you can watch after this with 3 separate videos. It goes through the theory, how to understand them properly, how to practice them to get them under your fingers, and then a really handy method for recognizing them and finding them really quickly on the piano. Plus there's a PDF for that too, which explains everything and has a big glossary with graphics for the inversions of every major and minor chord. Another really important thing to learn is how these chords fit inside keys. So which chords we can make out of the notes of, let's say, a major scale that you're working with. So if you're in G major, we take those 7 notes and we see which chords we can fit inside that scale, inside the key, when we play every other note like this. There's a pattern to it that works for every key, and it's an unbelievably useful part of music theory to learn. It helps understand harmony and how music and songs are put together, and there's a video and a PDF making that clear and simple too. Moving on to other types of chord then. There's some other 3-note chords that we want to learn next. Now, like learning any new type of chord, the clearest note to start from in terms of understanding the chord, learning how it's built and actually picturing it on the piano and being able to find it and play it, is starting from the note C. Then with all of these, generally speaking, it's going to be easiest and more useful to focus on the other chords starting from white notes first and then the black keys, or you can just use those 4 groups that we used earlier to help you organize your practice. The other 3-note chords to learn are diminished chords. Let me put one in a short progression. That one. Augmented chords. That one. People often teach diminished and augmented chords next because of the theory side of things, which is fine, but I actually think in a more modern context, these next 2 tend to come up more often. These are suspended chords, so we have sus2s and sus4s. There's a sus2, And here's a sus4 leading to a major chord. What's going to be really beneficial, even from the beginning really, but especially when you start wanting to create different types of chords, is to actually learn how chords are put together, the sort of theory side of it, and how that helps you actually find those shapes on the piano, because recognizing these shapes in different keys when we have a big variety of black and white keys can be very visually confusing. So actually learning the formulas for the chords really helps you physically find those chords. It's such an important thing to do. I've got a video here too to help you understand how we approach building chords using intervals and how to build major and minor chords, and there's a follow-up too which goes through all the other 3-note chords I was talking about, and I teach them in a way so you can just adjust major chord shapes to help find all those other chords easily in any key, which is a really handy trick to learn and understand them. And then there's another PDF I have on my website which is how to build loads of different kinds of common chords that are all on this list, all their chord formulas completely fully explained, and it has a massive glossary with graphics of all these chords in every key. And there's lots of other things in there too. It's very in-depth, goes into a lot of detail. I think it's a really valuable resource and a handy reference to have to help you learn. I totally get that the amount of chords may start to feel a bit overwhelming, but remember, you only have to do one at a time and build it up. And the point of learning to understand the chords is to make that whole process much more manageable and easier in the long run. Then we have 4-note chords. The ones we want to focus on first are what we call 7th chords, where we take one of the 7th intervals and we add it on top of one of the previous 3-note chords that we learned. The thing to focus on first is adding one of these 7th intervals onto either a major or a minor triad. I'm going to do a theory video on that soon, but it's all in that sheet. This gives us 4 combinations. 3 of them you use all the time. We have a major 7th chord, a minor 7th chord, a dominant 7th chord, or just one that's called 7, and then the one that you're not going to use quite as much, a minor major 7. The kind of James Bondy sounding one. Now we use those chords all the time in music. Definitely learn the 7th chords first, again starting from white keys then black, but we have some other types of 4-note chords too. We have add 2 chords, where we literally add a second onto a major chord or a minor chord. If you can do sus2 chords, you can do add 2 chords. We have 6 chords, which is a bit more of an old school sound. We have a major 6 chord and a minor 6 chord. Instead of adding a 7th onto the chord, we add a 6 onto the chord. And once you've learnt those, then we can learn to add 7ths onto the other types of triad that we learned at the beginning as well. To quickly sum up then, major and minor chords should be your focus at the beginning. Learning to recognize those will help you with finding all the other ones in the future. Then we have our other 3-note chords, diminished and augmented, and then the sus2 and sus4s. I think it's okay to do those in either order, and you could even start learning those once you've gotten like halfway through the major and the minor chords, all the white key ones. Then moving on to 4-note chords, the 7th chords we get from building on top of a major and a minor triad are the priority. They're the ones you're going to use the most. That's probably enough to be going for a while, and then when you get there, you can start making your way through the other types of 4-note chords. But again, you can be a bit flexible with this. You may come across those other things actually learning music, so it may make more sense for you to learn stuff slightly out of order when you need it. And just to point out, in the future, we can add more notes onto chords as well to create richer sounds. You can add on 9s, be on the octave, 11s, 13s, but you don't need to worry about that stuff yet. It's much more beneficial to learn those underlying chord structures first, and then in the future it will make much more sense when you start adding those more complicated things on top, those decorative, more colourful notes. Hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.